Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, October 31st, 2024. Happy Halloween, everyone. And I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor and ghastly ghoul, Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, my friend?
Ghastly ghoul? Where did that come from?
That's Halloween.
Yeah, I would say ghastly free.
Yeah, totally. I might be compelled to go put on a costume at this point. I'm flattered, but happy to be on, my brother.
Good to hear your voice, my friend. We are also pleased to be joined by our spooktacular man on the ground in Cleveland, Chad Plummer. CP, what's the word from the 216, my friend?
I bring it up the rear here a little bit, guys. I had this big candy. I was supposed to get that yesterday and got that. But yeah, man, everything's good in the 216. 5-star night for these little dudes and chickheads. Like down, it's like 68 degrees.
Oh,
like it's
beautiful.
Like wind, a little breeze. So they're gonna have a nice evening to do a little trick or treating.
Oh man.
But yeah, good to be back. I had to take the week off last week.
Well, it's good to have you back, CP. We are here today, of course, to preview number 4, Ohio State's pivotal season-defining visit to Happy Valley to play number 3, Penn State. To say there's a lot riding on this game for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes would be the understatement of the season so far. Now, Ohio State is coming off a clunky, uninspiring 21-17 win over Nebraska in the Horseshoe last Saturday. The Buckeyes finished the day with only 285 total yards. They were 1 of 10 on third down. Somehow there was only 9 combined targets for the best receiver duo in America, Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. But the defense comes to the rescue. The Silver Bullets finished with 13 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, a huge 4th and goal stop in the third quarter, and then the game-ending interception. Now, PVH, you had a family commitment last Saturday. You were spared the misery of watching this game. So if you want, you were blissfully excused from commenting on this game. But CP, before we look ahead to Penn State, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share about that performance last Saturday against the Huskers?
You know, I got to just say that it was obviously frustrating. It was, I don't know. You could just go on and on with the adjectives of like how I felt throughout that game. But you know what? Hey, I look at it this way. We got the win. Let's pivot. A couple things figured out. Shuffle the O-line, and then we'll go from there. So that's really, I told myself on Sunday, this is the only way we can look at this. It's a W. Let's move on.
Okay.
Well, that's true if you want to be half glass full.
I know, dude, but whatever.
I
could dive down right here. I know. I don't.
So there are multiple ways to look at it, Chad.
Yes, I 100% agree with you there. But I chose the route to just like alleviate the anxiety on my brain and everything else. I have enough of that, without worrying about the Buckeyes.
For sure.
Breaking down, but yeah. So, I agree with you. You know what? I actually think they needed that. I think that team needed that. I think Chip Kelly needed that. I think Ryan Day needed that. And, we're going to put that defensive stance at last, we need that intensity and fucking high level, ball out, all day Saturday. And it should be like that every, week. I don't care who we're playing. You know what I mean?
I totally agree.
That's what we need.
I think that is a fair way to look at the game if you want to say, hey, look, everybody's had at least one close call this year, right? Georgia had that 13-12 clunker against Kentucky. Oregon was life and death to beat an FCS team in its season opener. Penn State had a clunky performance against Bowling Green. So if that's the view that you want to take on this performance,
Northern Illinois,
they lost to Northern Illinois, and if that's
Notre Dame looks really good right now.
Yeah. So if that's the view that you want to take on this performance for Ohio State, I got no issue with that. PBH, I got one thought from my Sunday pod I want to reiterate, and then I'm going to kick it over to you for kind of a big picture, if you have any big picture thoughts before we move ahead to Penn State. I truly believe that Ryan Day's employment status with the Ohio State University is now on the line after that performance. I mean, we know the story, but it bears repeating here. Reportedly, $20 million was spent during the offseason to give him the best roster in college football. That included the number one prep player in America, the number one rated player in the transfer portal. He had a two-time NFL head coach fall into his lap to be his offensive coordinator. Nick Saban retired. His nemesis Jim Harbaugh left for the NFL. Guys, that's the college football equivalent of the Red Sea parting for Ryan Day. And look, the left tackle situation sucks, but that's no excuse. I mean, the rest of college football is playing the world's tiniest violin for Ryan Day's left tackle problems, which, by the way, were totally self-inflicted. He still has an embarrassment of riches on that roster. If the team I watched against Nebraska shows up in Happy Valley this Saturday, or in the Horseshoe against Indiana or Michigan, Ryan Day will be unemployed after this season, because not even qualifying for the Big Ten title game would be a complete and utter failure in my view. And if he can't qualify for the Big Ten title game, what makes us think he can win 4 straight playoff games, assuming he gets there? I know I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, as always, I reserve the right to change my view based on what happens over these next 5 games. New information, new take. But right now, that's where I stand on Coach Day. PVH, I want to kick this to you. Do you got any big picture thoughts you want to share before we look at Penn State?
So I actually was going to ask you, one of my questions for you was whether or not you felt sort of a prisoner of the moment by that comment on your Sunday pod, because that's a ballsy statement, especially from you, right? Like, I think you're the most, I would say, even keeled, right? You tried, as much as a huge fan as you are, to, maybe have a higher level sort of viewpoint on that. It sounds like clearly you do still feel that way. That
I do. Yeah, I do. And, I think what's helped, and I'll mention this a little later in the pod, but what's also kind of colored my view is, some guys that have been on the beat for a very long time, the Jeremy Birminghams of the world and the Doug Maurices, their confidence seems to be shaken in Ryan Day, and that's also coloring my view. But I just thought, coming off a loss, coming out of a bye week with an extra week to prepare, and not to mention all the other motivation that started the season, right? You don't have a pair of gold pants, no win against Michigan, no Big Ten titles for this group of seniors and juniors. That should be motivation enough, let alone losing on the road by 1 point to Oregon. There just doesn't seem to be enough fire in the belly for this team, and that concerns me. Even though they were able to get away with the win, to your point, CP, it just concerns me going into this matchup with Penn State. I don't know. What's your view on it, Paige?
Well, so like you said, I didn't watch it, right? Because I was up in Fort Collins with the boys at a tailgate and, watched a totally different football game, and did watch the first touchdown and then saw they were up 14-3. And didn't really pay attention. And then when I talked to you, third quarter, and it's like 14-9, and the desperation in your voice, like, I think the first thing you said is, like, when you called me back, you're like, they're going to lose this fucking game. Like, that's the first thing you said. And I'm like, oh God, this is really bad. Right. So at that point, you basically have a decision to make, like, am I going to be a prisoner of this and let this ruin my day or not? And I clearly chose the latter.
Good move.
I didn't pay attention. Yeah, and I didn't pay attention, even though there were people actually watching it at Jackson's tailgate on a frickin' phone. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do that. And if they effing blow it, they effing blow it. So be it. Even though in the back of my mind, like, I'd have been bummed out. They didn't. So again, I don't have a big picture on the X's and O's. And it's interesting because I have 2 people in my immediate orbit, my old man and my buddy Drew, and they are both firmly in the camp that Ryan Day is the second coming of John Cooper. And at this point, you can't just discount that, and there's a very distinct chance that he just doesn't have what it takes. It does seem like there's something missing, like, from a motivational perspective with this guy.
I agree.
And again, I thought I made some cheeky comment, about their hype videos, that they put out, because everyone's, talking about this topic. And I usually don't watch those things, but I actually did watch it this week. And it was all freaking Urban Meyer and JT Barrett firing up the team. I'm like, well,
right.
You know, and I understand why, right? Because JT had probably his best game ever against Penn State, but I'm like, those guys are gone. Right. Like, so why are we referencing those guys? And there is a lack of, there's just something missing with this team. I don't know what it is. And so that is my glass half empty take. My glass half full take is that, I think that bye did not help them at all, right? I think the last thing you want to do is sit there and think about it for two weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, to say, well, you had an extra week, you didn't prepare. You know, they were up 14-3. It seemed to me they should have had that game, you know, in hand, but whatever. It didn't go their way. So if you don't read too much into it, and they did get the W. And then the other thing is, you know, our big concern coming out of the Oregon game was the defense. Seems like they played better.
They did.
And so, you know, did the coaching staff make some adjustments and the team played better? So let's hope that the offense can do the same thing. I mean, they clearly have to figure out this offensive line thing, but come on, it's still Ohio State, you know. And I do think there's, you know, a multitude of different ways that they can address the situation, at least in the short term, and fix it, right? You guys, you know, just because one guy gets hurt and we're going to throw it all away, like, oh, that's it, like we can't recover from that, is ludicrous. So it's incumbent on Day and Kelly to figure it out. And you know, right the ship and go into Happy Valley and get a W. And but this is it, right? I mean, I do think in a lot of ways, like, this is the fork in the road for Ryan Day.
Absolutely. You can't lose another regular season game and miss the Big Ten title game. They will miss the Big Ten title game if they lose to Penn State, Indiana, or Michigan, because
and the margin for error for losing just that one, you know, on the road in a very tough environment, you know, that was fine. I have no problem with that one point loss. The problem is it gives you no margin of error, and boom, here we are. So they're going to have to do it, or it's lights out for, I think, Day.
I'm right there with you. All right, let's turn our attention to this coming Saturday afternoon. The Buckeyes travel to Happy Valley to take on number 3 Penn State. This game is a noon Eastern kick on Fox. I know you hate that kickoff time, PVH, but I'd rather be playing them at noon than at night. The line is Ohio State -3. It's moved a bit since I last checked it. It was 3.5 this morning. It's Ohio State -3 now, which is surprising me that they're the favorite in this game. The over-under is 45.5. This will be the 39th meeting between these two programs. Ohio State is 25-13 all-time against Penn State. And this, by the way, will only be the second time Ohio State and Penn State meet as top 5 teams. The only other time that happened was in 1996, a game which Ohio State won in Columbus 38-7. I remember watching that game with you, PVH, at Bayside in 1996.
Oh, I don't. I might have had too many libations.
Oh, you and me both, for sure. But somehow I remember that's where I watched the game, and I was with you. All right, so fellas, I want to start by looking at the Penn State offense, which is now led by first-year coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, who came over from Kansas. Kotelnicki has vastly improved Penn State on that side of the ball. Penn State comes into this game 13th nationally in total offense. They were 55th in that stat a year ago. They're 7th nationally in yards per play. They were 75th in that stat last season. Junior quarterback Drew Aller has been the biggest beneficiary of Kotelnicki's offense. Aller's completion percentage is up 11 percentage points from last season. He's completing 71% of his passes this season compared to 60% last year. Also, Aller's yards per attempt are way up. He's averaging 10 yards per attempt this season compared to 6.8 last season. Now, the big question around Aller is, will he play? He injured his knee at the end of the first half against Wisconsin last Saturday and did not return. James Franklin said earlier this week that Aller is a game-time decision, and if he can't go, Franklin's going to turn to Bo Pribula. Pribula replaced Aller after halftime against Wisconsin, and he played pretty well. He was 11 of 13 for 98 yards passing and a touchdown pass. He also ran for 28 yards on 6 carries. Now, I'm not sure what Pribula can give them with the vertical passing game, but he seems plenty capable at short to intermediate throws, and he's actually much more of a running threat than Aller. Pribula averages 6.3 yards per rush attempt this season. he's a good player who's part of the same recruiting class as Aller. But, look, there's a reason Aller's been the starter the last 2 seasons. If he cannot play for Penn State in this game, that'll be a big loss for them. But Penn State's best, most versatile player is senior tight end Tyler Warren. Andy Kotelnicki uses Warren all over the field. Warren has 47 receptions for 559 yards and 4 touchdown catches so far this year. One of those touchdown catches came against USC as a center-eligible receiver. Did either of you guys see that play? As a center-eligible? I'll explain the play in a bit. So Warren also has 7 rushes for 40 yards out of the Wildcat. He also has 2 pass completions for 26 yards. But PVH, what do we like to say about offenses whose best player is their tight end?
Well, I think that's golden rule number 7, if I'm not mistaken, right? If that's your best offensive player, then you have some problems on offense.
Now, we're very familiar as Ohio State fans with running backs Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They are a very solid pair of running backs. But Singleton is only averaging 3.4 yards per carry since returning from injury earlier this month. Allen's averaging about 5 yards a pop. This will be the 3rd time Ohio State will face this duo. And neither back has been a huge factor in these first 2 games. Between the two, only Allen has a touchdown in his career against the Buckeyes, and that was 2 years ago. Finally, at receiver, I don't know that we can say Penn State has any real difference makers. Harrison Wallace III is probably the best they have on the outside. He's their 2nd leading receiver behind Tyler Warren with 22 catches for 350 yards and only 2 touchdown catches. Actually, one of their best weapons, guys, in the pass game is Nick Singleton, the running back. Singleton is tied with Warren for the team leading touchdown catches with 4. And then there is, of course, Julian Fleming, the former Buckeye. He's on the roster. And Fleming is doing the same thing for Penn State he did the last several seasons for Ohio State. He's a glue guy, unselfish player, great blocker. He's good for a timely catch or 2 every game to keep the chains moving. But that's the skinny on the Penn State offense. CP, I'm going to kick this over to you. What do you expect to see from the Ohio State defense against this Penn State offense on Saturday?
Well, so Penn State has some question marks about their right tackle.
That's right.
Donkic.
That's correct.
Donko,
I think, is his last name. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's his backup is okay, but there's a pretty significant drop off. I think his backup is Nolan Rucci.
Yeah, Wisconsin transfer, I think.
Rucci, what's up? Yes, exactly. Denzel Burke, I don't know what's going on with this kid.
Yeah.
I think it's how many times last weekend, he made some nice tackles, some nice stops, but he just keeps, it's like a step, it's a repeat pattern.
Yeah, he's struggling.
Every Saturday now, he's getting burnt on multiple, downfield plays. Mm-hmm. And I'm not quite sure when we say, hey, you know what, Denzel, it's sorry, buddy, but it's time for you to come over here and sit the fuck on the pine, because you're really, you're making us look bad.
He's got to step up.
There's a chance that Ransom, he does have to step up. Ransom, there's a chance he's going to be back this weekend.
I heard that.
It could. Yeah, so that's
Ryan Day said he expects him to play. I don't know if that's gamesmanship, but I heard Ryan Day say that he expects Ransom to play in this game. I hope that's not just gamesmanship.
That would be, please, that would be. I would feel so much better about waking up on Saturday morning if that were I don't know how you send out the availability report. If I see him on there, I'm gonna probably maybe bust out and do the worm across the floor. I don't know, something crazy, maybe a backflip. I don't know, but and I alluded to this earlier. If the defense, we have the players, we have the talent. If they just that last defensive series, we need that in and out the entire 60 minutes.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Come on. This is make or break, baby.
I agree. Yeah, we need the defense that came up with that 4th down stop in the 3rd quarter and then the 2 stops at the end of the game. I totally agree with you. We need a 4-quarter performance from that defense. Yep. What else you got, CP?
Fucking grind it, boy. That's about all I got, man. It's you know what? Really, at the end of the day, go and get individual accolades, but and beat down Burke and a couple others, but it's there, man. Just grind it. That's
all right, man. I like it. PVH?
I get frustrated.
Yep. I like it. All right, CP. PVH, what else? What do you got? What are you going to be looking for when Penn State has the ball against the Ohio State defense?
I mean, it's never my strong suit, right? Like, this, that, they're not dynamic enough with wide receivers. I think it'll be a get-right game probably for Burke and our secondary. And, the other thing that just doesn't make any sense to me, I could sum it up into a Caden Curry. Like, why not play that guy? Play somebody, do some, and I know this is all everybody's talking about is the rotation and sort of the dysfunction. Why aren't they doing it? There's got to be a reason. But, if they can get pressure on the quarterback, it looks like he's going to play, right? Like he was practicing, he's out there. That's fine, right?
Yeah, dude.
But dude, they don't do anything exceptional, right? Like you said. So it's not like I'm that stressed about it. I mean, I think
they don't like to score points,
right?
I mean, like at the end of the day, like.
I just want to back you up real quick though before Caden Curry. You've been talking about Caden Curry all season, and he's only played 99 snaps this year. 99 snaps, and yet he's third on the defense in quarterback pressures. Third. He's got 9 quarterback pressures and only 99 snaps. Kenyatta Jackson's played 144 snaps. He only has 7 pressures. This guy makes an impact every time he's on the field. Just to your point, I want to back you up on that. Go ahead. What else you got?
No, and again, so I didn't watch the game last weekend. But there's just certain guys where you just like, man, he makes an impact. He's got a nose for the ball, right? He's not, and the fact, I'm not saying, bench JT or anything, or JTT or anything like that, but just get guys in there. And then, the whole rotational thing, it makes you wonder, like, are you guys not watching the same thing that clearly everybody else is watching? And there's, you give them the benefit of the doubt for so long, but you're just like, what the hell is going on? So, I expect it'll be a much better performance by our, secondary and Burke and those guys. And, I think Penn State will be able to have some success, but, there's nothing out there that really, really scares you. And to me, that's a red flag if I'm a Penn State fan.
Okay. I think Jim Knowles would be nuts to try to cover Tyler Warren with a linebacker. Sonny Styles and Cody Simon both have coverage grades in the 60s, according to PFF. We saw Styles struggle in coverage against Michigan State's tight ends earlier this season. So I think it'll almost certainly come down to Caleb Downs covering Warren, at the very least in high leverage moments of this game. Penn State's entire offense revolves around Warren. And if this is a matchup Caleb Downs can win, I think that'll go a long way to helping the Buckeyes get out of Happy Valley with a W. And we beat the topic to death, but the last time we saw the Silver Bullets in a matchup game on the road, Dylan Gabriel was carving him up because the front four couldn't get any pressure and the corners couldn't cover. Will Knowles take the same aggressive approach at bringing pressure on Penn State's quarterbacks as he did against Dylan Raiola last Saturday? I think that's a big question. This Penn State offense, look, it's a cut above Nebraska's, but I don't think it has anything remotely close to the speed and skill of the Oregon offense. Penn State is 93rd nationally in scrimmage plays at 30-plus yards. However, we've seen, as we've talked about, Davison Igbinosun and Denzel Burke struggle mightily in coverage these last 2 games. Of Ohio State's starting 11, Igbinosun and Burke are the lowest graded defenders according to PFF, with grades of 61.6 and 65.7. Can Knowles trust them to hold up in coverage when bringing pressure? I mean, that's a big question for me. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention JT Tuimoloau out here, right? I mean, in his last 2 games against Penn State, he's been utterly dominant. We remember the 2022 game where he went off and had 2 interceptions, a forced fumble. He had the pick 6, and he was a force in that game as well as last year. Can he complete the trifecta with another dominant performance in this game? And as you've mentioned, CP, Penn State might be without their starting right tackle, Anthony Donko, so that could be a huge factor in this game if he can't play. One last thing I'll say about the Penn State offense. I'm expecting the unexpected from Andy Kotelnicki. That dude loves to dial shit up. That is his natural state as an offensive coordinator, and he will almost certainly have a few tricks up his sleeve for this game. The play that I was describing, the center eligible play that he ran for Tyler Warren, that was against USC. That's the kind of shit that Kotelnicki does. So we talked about
a sweet play.
It was a great play. I mean, we've never seen Ohio State do anything like that. And I mentioned that play, and I mentioned Kotelnicki as a factor in this game because, guys, we've talked about Ohio State finding those extra advantages in the margins against matchup opponents. Well, Penn State has a guy who can do that. Okay, let's flip it around and have a look at the matchup that I think will determine the outcome of this game. And that's the Penn State defense against the Ohio State offense. Now, as one would expect, Penn State comes into this game with a top 10 defense in most of the traditional metrics: total defense, defensive yards per play, and rush defense. But when you look at things like stop rate, lost yardage plays, and takeaways, those numbers tell a bit of a different story about this Penn State defense. This Penn State defense ranks 21st nationally in stop rate. Now, stop rate is a defense's ability to get stops and prevent points. Pretty simple. Now, for context, the top 4 in stop rate are Tennessee, Texas, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. And if we look at where Ohio State's last 3 opponents are in stop rate, Nebraska's 23, Oregon is 14, and Iowa is 25th. So again, Penn State is 21st. At least in that category, they're closer to Nebraska and Iowa as a defense than they are to like a Tennessee or Texas. And if we look at lost yardage plays and takeaways, Penn State right now is tied for 78th nationally in sacks. They led the country in sacks a year ago. They're tied for 61st nationally in tackles for loss. They finished 2nd nationally in TFLs a year ago. Finally, they're 82nd in takeaways. They were 13th nationally in that stat a year ago. Now, for context, Nebraska, who, as we know, Ohio State just saw last week, they're 16th nationally in sacks, 27th in tackles for loss, and 45th in takeaways. Nebraska's significantly more productive than Penn State in all those areas. Now, having said all that, this Penn State defense still has some dudes, right? Starting with edges Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton, they're tied for the team lead in pressures with 21 apiece. Carter is their leader in sacks with 4. Now, Dennis Sutton is another player, guys, who was injured last week against Wisconsin, and his status is in doubt for this game. If he's unavailable or limited, I think that'd be a huge break for the struggling Buckeye offensive line. Another player to watch in this game is defensive tackle Zane Durant. He's Penn State's highest graded defender, according to PFF, with a grade of 82.2. Durant is also second on the team in sacks with 2.5. Another name to watch is Kobe King. He's a linebacker. King is their second highest graded defender, according to PFF. Safety Jalen Reed, another player to watch. He's very good. He's their leading tackler. He leads them in interceptions as well with 2. Finally, keep an eye on A.J. Harris. He's the former 5-star who transferred from Georgia. He's their top cornerback. Harris leads the Penn State defense with a coverage grade of 82.1, according to PFF. Okay, CP, get us started. What will you be watching when Ohio State has the ball against this Penn State defense?
Play calling,
Mm-hmm.
That all starts, though, with our offensive line. Who are they shifting around? Obviously, Mahalski's not going to be able to play.
Right.
And, Paige, what was that like in the text? He says, if this guy's a 5th year, and he's in, there's no reason or anything why he should be starting right now anyway. You know what I mean? But regardless, that's where we are. But, as long as, we juggle, there's going to be a couple people move on that offensive line.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to go over. Look, Montgomery looked like, you know what I mean? He didn't look like he was uncomfortable moving over there.
He's a fringe top 100 player. He should be able to play in year 2, right?
100%. He should be ready to step up in there.
Yeah.
So but that's kind of concerning that he is the statistics you just mentioned. Versus a 5th-year senior. But offense, it's all going to start. We've got to get the run game, man. We have the best head-to-head tandem running backs in college football. And we got 64 yards last week?
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
Or Keyshawn had 64 yards. I don't know.
No. Ohio State as a team ran for 64 yards and 2.1 yards per carry against Nebraska last week. That is unacceptable.
Okay, right, exactly. Yeah, that is that's embarrassing.
Yep. PVH, what are you going to be watching when Ohio State has the ball against this Penn State defense?
Remember the old days where it was the thing where offenses would script the first 15 plays?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that was right. That was ever true.
I think that still happens. Yeah.
Okay. So my thought process is CP was going is, if that does happen, and let's just say hypothetically you're going to do that, if the first 15 plays that you have scripted and not 8 of them are targeting Jeremiah Smith, then you all should be fucking out of Columbus.
Amen to that.
Every fucking one of you. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, dude, you're sitting there with not only the best player on the field, not only probably, I mean, right, I'm projecting here, but the wide receivers that have come through that university in the last 5 years, he's going to be better than all of them.
That's crazy.
If he is not the absolute focal point for the entirety of this game and moving forward, I don't know what you're doing. Then why don't recruit those guys? Don't get them. Don't bring them in the building, right? Mm-hmm. The guy will change everything. And you know what? Run the ball. Fuck. Who cares? If you have Jeremiah Smith just going up and down the field, you don't have to run the ball. And by the way, if you're doing that, then you will be able to run the ball. I don't understand this mindset that you have to run the ball to open up other things. And you know, if you get Jeremiah Smith going, then guess who else gets going? Tate and Ibuka, and then, you know, the tight end over the middle. Mm-hmm. If your game plan doesn't begin and end with that, I'm sorry. Like, I just don't understand it. And, you know, clearly, if, you know, we were just world beaters on the offensive line and, you know, we can line up and, you know, just run the ball down their throats, sure, do that. But that's not us. That's not the reality of the situation. So I don't know why you just don't make that kid the focal point of everything. And if we go down and it doesn't work, then I can live with that. But
at least you went down swinging.
Yep. You went down swinging.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I couldn't agree with you more. When I look at the numbers, I see a good, not great Penn State defense that doesn't have the depth of playmaking it did a year ago. And we talked about this, guys, when we looked at this game during the offseason. They lost 2 NFL defensive ends from last year's defense. Chop Robinson was a first-round pick. Adisa Isaac, who actually led them in sacks last year, was a third-round pick. Also, by the way, Manny Diaz isn't calling that defense for them anymore. He's the head coach at Duke right now. Tom Allen, the former failed Indiana head coach, is the DC now. And look, Abdul Carter is a very good player. But I'm just not sure he's the second coming of Micah Parsons. And people are kind of talking about him like he is. They wear the same number. Carter has 4 sacks this season. Okay, that's good. But that's tied for 9th in the Big Ten with JT Tuimoloau. Carter has 21 pressures so far this season. For context, Jack Sawyer has 25. And to me, I think this game will also be won or lost by the plan for and the play of the offensive line. Now, Bill Landis thinks Donovan Jackson is going to be moved from left guard to left tackle and places in Mahalski, who, as we know, was injured against Nebraska. He thinks Austin Sareveld will start at left guard. Sareveld's played a lot of football for them this season. He's been their 6th man on the offensive line. If Day, Kelly, and Fry can somehow cobble together a good plan for protecting Will Howard, I think Ohio State wins. Like you, I want to see a minimum of 25 combined targets for Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka.
Hallelujah.
You've got to play to your strength in this game. They are the best receiver duo in America. Please use them. Okay. And now they certainly have to try to keep the Penn State defense honest by running the ball, but I think it's going to be tough sledding for Trey Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in this game. Ohio State has not been able to run the ball effectively since the first half of the Oregon game, and that ties directly to the loss of Josh Simmons and Will Kazmarek, who is their best blocking tight end. But if Kelly can scheme up 100 to 120 rushing yards on Saturday, I'll be thrilled. And I think that also involves Will Howard making better reads than he did against Nebraska. And you didn't see this, PVH, but I said this on Sunday, and it was confirmed by Ross Fulton. He's one of the film nerds I follow on Buckeye Huddle earlier this week. Howard made several mistakes in some of his zone reads and RPOs against Nebraska. And he handed the ball to Henderson and Judkins to run into a heavy box when there was clearly a pull read or a throw that would have been a better option. So I'm looking for Will Howard to make better choices in those situations. But let's be honest. The outcome for Ohio State rests on the arm of Howard and in the hands of Smith and Egbuka. That's how they're going to win this game. Paige, how about you? Any other thoughts about this offense against the Penn State defense?
There's NFL talent littered up and down that offense. Just figure it out, man. Like, feed those guys, feed the beast. And guess what? You know, if you make Smith, you know, the focal point for the first quarter and a half, then they'll adjust, but then that will open things up for the other guys, is my point, right? Mm-hmm. And if they take away Smith with the double or triple team, then so be it. Tate's going to be wide open, so's Ibuka. I mean, it's going to be tight ends open in the middle. I just think that they like, I don't know. They try and not be cute enough, I guess, or what I'm saying. But it's just throw the balance out of it. I want to run for 250 and pass for 250. I don't care, right? Just be the dynamic offense that you should be, right? And Kelly can totally do this, right? I mean, the guy's forgotten more about football than just about anybody coaching today. But to me, it begins and ends with Smith. And, if you got to pass it a lot, so be it. And I do think, there was an interesting press conference with Kelly, and they were sort of talking about the read option. And he's like, yeah, I don't really want that guy to get hurt. Like if you read between the lines, and it's like, this is not the time to be cautious anymore. Right. And I get it. And what I read from that is, if Howard gets hurt and we have to bring in Brown, we're totally screwed. So that's kind of why we're not doing that. But,
they're not bringing in Brown.
This is the game, right, where they need to unlock everything. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Howard running, or even just, straight up, quarterback runs called.
I think he has to. Yeah. I think he does have to be a factor in the run game. It was funny. I was Urban Meyer's game breakdown. Of course, Urban Meyer's going to say this. He needs to run the quarterback 15 to 20 times in this game. I'm like, of course. I mean, Urban, that was his security blanket. When in doubt, JT Barrett left, right, up the middle. But no, I do think Howard has to be a factor in the run game. And that's what I was referring to with just making better reads in the zone read and the RPO. When there is a pull read, pull it and run. He's a big dude, right? He's 6'5", 220 pounds. He can take he can take a little hit here and there. And then, hey, a couple weeks ago we saw Emeka Egbuka lined up in the backfield on a couple of jet sweeps there. Why not do that? Get creative. To your point, everything's on the table, right? All hands on deck. So, all right, fellas, let's fire up the concernometer. PVH, I'm going to start with you. Give us your concernometer readout for this game.
Well, okay. I mean, it's on the road at Penn. It's on the road at Penn State, so you're starting at a 5. You're starting at a 5, and then after the performance last week in Nebraska, I think in the moment we're all 8+, maybe 9s. But the more I've kind of marinated on this and given it some thought, it's brought the temperature down for me. And talking to my father, who again is all about, hey, this is the second coming of John Cooper. He had a throw-in line that kind of stuck with me. And he's like, it's Penn State. I mean, they have their fucking number. And it's true, right? Like if you think about it, this is the one team that somehow, some way that, we always get by. In fact, I think we've won, 15 out of 18 in the last 8 in a row.
7 in a row, yeah.
Yeah, 7 in a row. So I'm gonna settle at a 6.
Wow, a
down
6.
From my 8 or 9 earlier in the
top 5 matchup on the road against number 3, and it's a 6. Okay, you must be feeling pretty confident. CP, give us your concernometer readout for this game.
I'm going to go 7.75.
7.75. Okay.
It's the first fractional concernometer in the South Stand's history.
So these are the facts. Ryan Day's counterpart, James Franklin, has been even worse against the top 5 than Day. Franklin is 1-12 against top 5 opponents. He's 1-9 against Ohio State, and he's 0-5 against Ryan Day. But my concernometer, despite all of that, is a 10. The offensive line issues are chief among my concerns, but those aren't my only concerns. And when I talked about a little bit earlier in the pod, this week we had former players and guys who've been on the beat for a long time, like Jeremy Birmingham, talking about player entitlement and a lack of leadership and lack of passion in that locker room. Zach Bourne was there on Saturday. He said the Ohio State sidelines for most of the Nebraska game looked like a funeral. And like I said, there just doesn't seem to be any fire in the belly of this team right now. You want to see what fire in the belly looks like. Watch the Indiana Hoosiers, guys. And they're beating the snot out of their opponents with a small fraction of Ohio State's talent and resources. I'm not seeing that with the Ohio State Buckeyes right now, and that's very concerning to me heading into this game. All right, boys, let's get some score predictions. PBH, I'm going to kick this back to you. Again, the line is Ohio State -3. The over-under is 45.5. Give us your score prediction.
28-21 Buckeyes.
28-21 Buckeyes. I like it. CP, how about you? Give us a score prediction.
35-26.
35-26. Okay.
Nittany Lions.
Ohio State? Penn
Yeah.
State? All right, you got 35-26 Ohio State. PVH, you've got 28-21 Ohio State. Earlier this week, I was pretty sure I was going to pick Ohio State.
Here we go.
I was pretty sure earlier this week I was going to pick Ohio State to lose this game. But after looking at Penn State's defensive numbers, which aren't as daunting as I was expecting, and considering the injuries that they're dealing with, especially Drew Aller and Denai Dennis Sutton, and then being reminded of James Franklin's dismal record against top 5 teams, I'm picking Ohio State by a whisker, 23-20.
So the one thing I would say, just to add to that, is we all become prisoners of moment based on the last performance. And I'm reminded of watching, Georgia fall down 28-0 to Alabama and then go into Texas and just absolutely destroy that team. Mm-hmm. So from week to week, right? You never know what you're going to get. And
That's true.
Think as Ohio State had, and then I think, well, okay, but have they been super dominant all season? No, they haven't. Like Akron, right? I pulled out my rant of the,
the F- rant.
Effing minus, So then that kind of flips me the other way. But I think you have to be careful just, to make too many judgments based on a single performance.
That's a good point.
Everything on paper, we should win this game. Now it's up to them to do it, execute, and outcoach the other guys. And if we lose it, then I think then all that stuff goes out the window and everything's on the table. Is kind of what we were talking about before.
I heard somebody, or actually saw somebody post something interesting on X. He said that this game kind of reminds him of the 2014 Michigan State game. And it's not a perfect parallel, but I think there are some similarities. If you guys remember 2014, we lose the early game to Virginia Tech and actually had some other struggles throughout the season, including a game that went to overtime against Penn State, and they were not very good that season. And then Ohio State had to go on the road and play a very good Michigan State team. They were the defending Big Ten champs. I think they were actually an underdog in that game. And they exploded, right? They ended up winning that game by, 18, 19 points. The offense went off. And I thought that was just a very interesting post. I'm not predicting that to happen, but this game does have that potential where Ohio State goes in there and then they show us who they really are. I personally think it's going to be very close, but hey, I'd be very happy to be wrong about that. And that's what we see out of Ohio State instead of a close game.
Just win, baby.
Just win.
You just win.
Just win. All right, fellas. There really is only one other game on Saturday's slate that really piques my interest, and that's number 1 undefeated Oregon traveling to Ann Arbor to face unranked 5-3 Michigan. Now, this game is a 3:30 p.m. Eastern kick on CBS and Paramount Plus. The line is Oregon minus 14.5. The over/under is 45.5. Now, so far this season, visiting teams in Big Ten play are 5-14 when they have to travel across at least 2 time zones. Now, this will be the second time Oregon has had to do that as a visiting team, but the first time they did it was against the worst team in the Big Ten, Purdue. And look, that game could have happened on the fucking moon, and Oregon would still won that by 5 touchdowns. This road trip for Oregon, even against a diminished Michigan team, I think is going to be a different kind of a test for the Ducks. CP, I want to start with you. Who do you like in this game?
Michigan's not going to win the game. Although I would fucking love that. But
you would.
I think they will.
You'd like Michigan to win this game?
I would love them to win this game.
Wow, really? I don't think that helps us at all. I don't think we want. I mean, it's obviously your preference.
Why?
But
really, at the end of the day, what really helps and hurts anybody? It's just just get into that 12-team college playoff. But I think I would like them to have a little nick, wake the fuck up, Dan Lanning, kind of come to Jesus.
Okay.
Dylan Gabriel, he's now the Heisman favorite. I mean, did anybody watch the film against Michigan State with that kid? He's terrible.
Who are we talking about? Michigan's quarterback?
We're talking about Dylan Gabriel.
Dylan Gabriel.
Like
I don't know, man. He looked pretty fucking good to me, especially against Ohio State. Look, Oregon is a good fucking team, man. That team is loaded. They can.
They are. Don't get I don't get wrong, but there's so much about that 14.5-point line.
Yeah.
You want Oregon to lose because it creates chaos as far as who potentially could get into.
Do I think they will? No.
But it's also pretty good to have Ohio State losing by 1 to the number 1 team in the country on the road.
Yeah, I think so. And it's Michigan. Why would the fuck would we ever root for Michigan?
And it's Michigan.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah, and you need to rethink your rooting interest there and get back to SCP. All right.
Go back to handing out trick-or-treat candy and rethink your... Because again, this is maybe the third time that you've mistakenly talked about stadiums. Like... Getting worried about your location dexterity in some of these situations kind of concerning.
You're 100% right. I would not want Michigan to beat them. That's so stupid. Even though I want Michigan to win against everybody else, so they're undefeated when we play, but that's not even on the board this year. So
yep.
Fuck them.
All right. So you like Oregon to win? Do you think they cover? Do you think Oregon covers? I'm assuming so. If you thought the line should be up in the 20s.
No, he wants Michigan to win. He's an emotional mess.
No, I don't, dude.
He's an emotional mess right now.
Sketch that shit. Shake it up. It's invisible. It's gone. Michigan covers. Oregon wins.
Okay. PBH, how about you? How do you see this game playing out?
So I don't know why I know this, but I do know this, or you can fact check me. Michigan is 86th in the country against the pass. They're going to get their asses kicked. This isn't going to be close, right? Unless I didn't check the weather, but if Oregon can throw the ball against Ohio State secondary like that, good effing luck, Michigan.
Yeah.
God knows who's going to be their quarterback, right? You guys got you have retiring quarterbacks in the middle of the season. Oh man, it's not going to be pretty. I mean, this could be.
I heard Eminem was quarterback.
Yeah, I'm going to say 34 to 6. This is
wow.
Going to be a rout.
Okay.
Rout.
Okay. See, I think the Michigan defense is good enough to keep them in the game for a while. I expect it to look close on the scoreboard for most of the afternoon, but it never really feels like Oregon is truly at risk of losing. I've got the Ducks by 10, which isn't a cover, but it's still a pretty convincing road win. And, of course, we continue to revel in Michigan's misery.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, fellas. Any other thoughts before we wrap things up? PBH, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that game's after ours. So come on, let's get the what is it in horse racing? Not the trifecta, the exacta. Let's get the exacta of the Buckeye W, and then a Michigan blowout by the Ducks. That's a double win for Buckeyes.
That'd be a nice afternoon. I would totally take that. Yep. All right, fellas, that was a fine effort for a Halloween night. Why don't we end things there for our listeners? Check your feeds on Sunday afternoon for a recap of the Penn State game from yours truly. Until then, thanks so much for listening. Happy Halloween, and go Bucks. You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at @South_stands.